I've sent millions of cold emails and thousands of LinkedIn connection requests and DMs. And so in this video, I'm going to be breaking down both LinkedIn and cold email as outreach channels to be using to generate more leads and show you which one might be better for you depending on your use case to help you generate more leads, more sales calls, and more revenue for your business. So let's dive straight in. All right, so diving in, we're going to be comparing cold email to LinkedIn outreach to help you determine which one is better for you and which one you should be doing and help you decide the pros and cons between these two. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about cold email. Like I said, I've sent millions of cold emails. We booked thousands of meetings just from cold email alone. So know a thing or two about cold email. The first pro that I'm going to talk about whenever we're comparing it against LinkedIn is the cost to scale. So in the case of LinkedIn and cold email, it's funny because they're two separate platforms, but it roughly comes out to both of them that you can send about 20 cold emails per day safely. I say safely because technically you can send, I think Gmail has it somewhere on their website, you can send up to 2,000 emails per day from one email account. If you do that, you're going to burn out your email account really quickly, go to spam. Again, assuming you're doing cold emails, not to people on a list. So if you are setting up an email account for cold email, let's just use the 20 number here. And then LinkedIn, you can send about on their website, they say about 200 connection requests per week, which comes out to about 20 per day. I say about 20 per day because it's up to 200 a week. There's some nuance there in how they cap your limit. So let's just say safely about the same, right? If you have one LinkedIn account and one email account, you can send about the same amount of outbound outreaches. But the difference is that if you want to set up a bunch of LinkedIn accounts, it can become extremely tedious. So let's say you want to set up a LinkedIn account and you set up a bunch of them. They're going to flag your account pretty quickly if you do it from the same IP. So you might have to get different IPs. It's a lot more complex to set up 50 LinkedIn accounts. And then the issue you'll run into is if they're fresh accounts, you have to get them warmed up with profile visits, followers. You're gonna have to set up the accounts. It's a lot more tedious. And so the people that I know that are scaling LinkedIn outreach, they're just buying email accounts from a vendor. And so if you want to buy like a pre-warmed LinkedIn account, from what I've seen, that can run you anywhere from, $20 to $50 plus per month, or even I've seen as high as $99 per month for one LinkedIn account, which can send 20 connection requests per day. And again, these are connection requests. These aren't actual messages that people are seeing. This is assuming that people will accept your connection request and then you can actually message them. So the cost to do this is a lot higher. The reason why is because if you want to do this on email, it costs you about $7.20 per month if you're going through Google Workspace and you want to set up an email account like that. If you use private servers, it can get even cheaper per email account. And then the other piece here is the automation tool. So if you want to automate your email outreach at this scale, it'll cost you about $99 a month through a tool like SmartLead to, again, send about 1,000 emails per day. Now, on the other hand, most LinkedIn, if you're using an automated approach, they charge per seat, which is about $99, right? Again, it depends on the tool you're using. You can check out, there's a tool called HeyReach, there's a tool called Expandy. These are both LinkedIn automation tools and they charge anywhere from like $70 to $100 per month per seat. This is per seat, right? In the email case, it's $99 for all 50 of those accounts. In the LinkedIn case, it's $99 per account. Now, granted, you get economies at scale, but the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is that if you want to send, let's say in this case, 1,000 emails per day on email, it might run you anywhere, depending on your setup, from about $500 to $1,000 per month. Again, this is just for the tech. And most of the cost in doing this is your time involved, not the tech itself. On the other hand, if you want to replicate this type of volume, again, connection requests, not actual outbound messages sent, this would cost you thousands of dollars per month. I'm not even going to put a figure here because it depends on the exact setup you're doing. It's just a lot more complicated to scale and a lot more cost intensive to scale. That's one of the cons there. Now, the things that'll help you on LinkedIn, if you have employee accounts that you can use and they want to manually do it instead of using an automation tool, which is technically safer, then you can do that as well. So that's one of the pros of email is the scale. Now I'm going to actually jump over here to LinkedIn. One of the pros of LinkedIn, I'm going to go back and forth and get to all these. One of the pros of LinkedIn is the conversion rate. I'm going to use these same numbers again. So I'm going to just put conversion. In the case of you sending 1,000 emails, how the KPIs typically fall out is that you're going to get a 1 to 2% reply rate on email sent. So that means that if you send 1,000 emails per day, you'll see anywhere from 10 to 20 replies on average. Now, it depends on the market you're reaching out to. If you reach out to enterprise markets, you might see less. If you're reaching out to small business markets, you might see more, but this is about what you can expect. So if you send 1,000 emails per day, you get 10 to 20 replies. And then if 10% or 20% of those people are interested, you can get a handful of leads coming in per day. Again, depending on how well you execute the system. Now, on the other hand, if you're doing LinkedIn outreach, we see anywhere from, assuming again, someone accepts your connection request, request anywhere from upwards of a 10% plus reply rate or even higher, right? The reason why is because LinkedIn is a social platform. If a total stranger emails you, you're more likely to not respond to it because they're a total stranger. But on LinkedIn, you have a real profile, you have followers, you have posts, you have all this different stuff that people can look at you and say, hey, this looks legitimate. So you get higher reply rates. Now, again, I would argue that in the case of cold email, that we're not necessarily optimizing for the percentage rate, we're optimizing for the total throughput. So in most cases, again, it makes more sense to do email in this case. But if you have a tiny market and you're really trying to squeeze that, I would say that's one case where LinkedIn, I would say you should probably do both LinkedIn and email. But if you had to pick one, LinkedIn's going to get you a higher conversion rate on the outbound messages you're sending, but email very likely is going to get you a higher volume of total replies and total throughput and total meetings booked. That's what I would say is one of the pros for LinkedIn. Going back to email, one of the pros again of email is that everyone has an email. The amount of what I'm just going to put leads, right? If you want to reach out to, let's just say you have a decision maker you want to reach out to, pick any Fortune 500 CEO or pick anyone in the world you want to reach out to, some sort of, executive. I should say everyone basically has an email and checks their email. That's the other important thing here too. A lot of people have LinkedIn but don't check their LinkedIn. And then in some industries, like if you're reaching out to blue collar industries, most people won't even have a LinkedIn, right? If you're trying to reach out to an operations manager at, a small contracting company, they're probably not going to have a LinkedIn. If you're trying to even reach out to the CEO of a small contractor, they're probably not going to have a LinkedIn. If you're comparing these two channels for those two things, let's say you're trying to reach out to local businesses too. A lot of those guys don't have LinkedIn. One of the pros again of email is the amount of leads you can reach out to and the fact that almost everyone checks their email. If you're reaching out via LinkedIn, again, your conversion rates can be higher. The people that see your messages are more likely going to respond, but there's less people on LinkedIn than there is on email, and people check their LinkedIn accounts less typically. Now, if they do check their LinkedIn account more, again, LinkedIn's probably the better approach, but in most cases, email is going to be the winner here. I'm going to go back here to LinkedIn. Another thing we're going to talk about, and this ties into conversion rate, is the actual pitches, right? The reason why I want to bring this up here is that on email, you have to go pretty directly in for a pitch, which again is going to be less likely that someone's going to immediately respond to that, which again could be useful if you're trying to go directly for the kill. But on LinkedIn, you can take a more conversational approach. Images here of actual conversations I've had on LinkedIn of people being interested in my services where I didn't even pitch them. I'm going to have the first line blurred out because that's top secret stuff, but we have LinkedIn connection requests that I've run from my account where I just say, hey, what's up? Give a little bit of a personalized line. And these people immediately ask, hey, what's your services? What's your pricing? Hey, we should grab lunch sometime or something to that effect, which definitely doesn't happen on email. With email, you're going to have to go pretty directly in and say what you do and pitch them pretty directly, versus with LinkedIn, you can take a lot more of a conversational approach. You can take a more of a networking approach, and you can add them to your network so that they see your content in the future. That is kind of ties in with this point. You don't have to directly pitch them. You can add them to your network. They can look at your profile. Maybe they're not ready to convert now, but they're almost effectively as part of your, it's like being on a newsletter where they're just going to continually see your content. So if you're active on LinkedIn, that can help you a lot. And also if your profile is properly optimized, it's going to make it a lot easier again for people to convert. The next thing I'm going to talk about here, a pro on email, is there is less risk on email. Now, the reason why I say this is because email is a platform that's not owned by any specific person. So let's say, email is actually just a protocol, and then there's big players like Google and Microsoft and Zoho and all these different platforms that, try and make email more usable, but there's no risk on email, especially in regards to automation, right? If you're using email and you want to make a bunch of accounts, let's say, again, in this case, you want to set up 50 accounts, and one of those accounts gets burned and you're not using your primary domain, which you definitely should not be doing, you have very, very low risk because you're not using your main domain, versus on LinkedIn, you're probably going to want to use your main account for outreach. And so if anything were to happen to it, you can just get a new email account, spin it up like it's nothing, versus LinkedIn. Usually what I would recommend is that you send actual LinkedIn DMs from your main account because the conversion rate again is going to be higher. The main pro to LinkedIn is to not use the AI generated accounts and to actually use your legitimate main account. So there's less risk if you're running automation through email. Now, again, going back to LinkedIn here, and then I'm going to wrap up and show like the specific use cases of which ones or which case I think it would make more sense for. The last thing I'm going to talk about here on LinkedIn is deliverability. This is a big thing on email, is that if you want to set up deliverability, or like one of the biggest concerns with email is deliverability. It's pretty easy, I would say, to set up a bunch of email accounts. Now, the problem is following all the best practices over email and making sure it's executed properly. And if you do this at scale and you want to send links in your outreach or images in your outreach, it's going to make it a lot less likely that your emails are going to land in the primary folder. So if it's super crucial for your outreach that you need to have links and images, which I would say is very few cases that you should use LinkedIn over email, or LinkedIn would be a better approach. Because again, if you send a link in an email, there's a very high likely chance that your email is going to land in spam. People aren't going to see it and people aren't going to convert on that. So one of the big benefits to LinkedIn is that if someone accepts your message and you send them a link or an image or whatever extra attachment, they're very likely going to see it, versus on email, there's a lot lower chance, which again is going to help your conversion rate. And so if I were to sum all of this up before diving into like the specific use cases, I would say that the main pro of LinkedIn, if I could sum it all up, is that LinkedIn, you're doing less volume, but you're getting higher conversion rates. So you're not sending 1 million outreaches per day. You're not plastering the whole market like you can with email. However, your response rate is going to be higher. You're going to get more people that reply to your messages because it's a more social channel and there's more trust. And you're able to send stuff in your DMs that is harder to send in email for the spam risk reasons. Now, on the other hand, email, the main pro is the scale, the amount of people you can reach, and just how cost effective it is. This is why in most cases, if I were to pick one of these two channels to scale your B2B outreach, I would pick email. However, there are a lot of cases where LinkedIn is useful. It really just depends, again, where your decision makers are located, how many decision makers there are in your market, and what specifically you're trying to accomplish. Now, in most cases, for most sales teams, and if you're trying to generate the most pipeline possible, I would say do both of them. But I would say that the core one that you're likely going to generate most of your leads from is email, mainly just because of the volume, the scale. And even though the conversion rate is slightly less on a relative basis, on an objective basis with how much scale you can do, there's possibilities you can book a meeting a day, 2 meetings a day. You can get hundreds of leads per month, which is what we're doing for some of our customers. That's basically both of those. And also the last thing I'll wrap up, and this is like a little hack that I would say, if you are looking to really maximize your email throughput too, you should also connect with people who respond on email on LinkedIn. I would say that's the happy medium, where you use email as a way to get in front of as many people as possible. Then you use LinkedIn to connect with the warmest people from your email outreach and then nurture them to get them, again, the highest probability to convert. So that's what I would recommend. LinkedIn and email outreach, I think they're both really useful. If you're looking for help on either one of these, or you're looking to build a system that actually continually generates sales meetings and pipeline for your sales team to help you grow your business, you can check one of the links in the description below and apply to work with our team, since we help manage these systems on behalf of our customers. And then if you're looking for more ways to generate B2B leads for your business, check out the other videos on this channel. Hopefully you get some value from this, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day.